Hello, everybody. Welcome to Awarewolf Radio. I'm your host, Justin Deschamps from Stillness in the Storm, and I'm joined by my co-host, Neil Garr from Portal to Ascension. Neil, how's it going?
Good, man. It feels like a long time since I've been on here with you.
I know, right? Well, yeah, I had that one show with David Whitehead a couple weeks ago, so it's been a month, but in today's time, that might as well be like a year because so much stuff goes on in such a short period of time right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And we were going weekly just before that.
exactly, yeah. So it feels a little strange for that reason, but lots
Yeah.
of stuff going on today, everybody. Today we're going to have Dustin Nemos on from Nemos News Network. He covers a lot of interesting news. So we'll bring him on about halfway through the show. And we'll get to some announcements in a little bit. But before we do that, we're going to have a little conversation about something, right? Neil, you wanted to bring something up, yeah?
Yeah. So we're talking just about, before we got on the show, we're checking in with each other, how we were and everything. And before we talked about via text, there's a little bit of anxiety going around, like personally. And, I can concur and definitely feel that there's anxiety going on for me. And in the beginning of this whole pandemic thing, I had like a good, few weeks, if not more, of complete ecstaticness, call to action, right? And I still feel that way. I still feel like, oh my God, like some things are changing and shifting. This is the time we've been waiting for. But then I was checking in with myself to see why I feel this anxiety. And not only is it collective anxiety everywhere being pushed on us, and as empaths, I'm sure we're receiving it, but also just the fact that life exists about planning for the future. That's what we're always doing. We have anticipation of what's to come. With Portal to Ascension, I'm literally on the like on the cusp of like the greatest moment in Portal to Ascension history, and I'm holding back because I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm not investing the money in the places I'm going to. I'm definitely going moment to moment. I'm not even paying my rent ahead of time, even if I can, like I'm not doing any of that stuff because I really don't know what's going to happen. Is the monetary system going to collapse, or is everything going to get reset? Are these industries going to still exist in a month from now? Is there a coordinating attack on our community? And, so I feel that my anxiety personally has been being overwhelmed, but then also the fact that I'm so used to planning for what we're going to create next. But right now, it's not really possible.
That's a great point. I was thinking about the same thing, because I've been noticing, I mean, I'm a pretty high stress person anyway, in the sense that I've got a lot going on, not necessarily that I'm very stressed, but there's a lot happening. So when you're juggling, 12 things at once, it's easy to get a little freaked out when you miss one. And, but recently it's been like more intense, like the tiniest little thing will happen. All of a sudden it's like, I go from 0 to 10. I'm like, whoa, this isn't that big of a deal. Why are my emotions flying around so crazily? And I think you hit the nail on the head, because as humans, we have this special gift that animals don't have, which is that we can plan for the future. Animals don't necessarily have that capacity in the same way we do anyway. And so if you think about it, in reality, is more of you is oriented towards thinking about planning and coordinating yourself around the future than really dealing with the present. Like if I told you, we're going to have this amazing event in a month and it's going to completely change our world. We're going to have a new monetary system. The aliens are going to show up. They're going to take the cabal off the earth. The very fact of you imagining that is going to create an emotional experience that is basically like that event happening. So what happens when you take a pandemic and you just strip away everybody's plans for the future? Man, it's gonna throw everything into disarray, right? I mean, so yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
So is this a test of, because I've heard many things, we know for sure in the community it's about being in the moment, right? And even I've heard things about like, the let's call them some elite negative ET agenda beings, even ciphering energy of us not living in the moment. That's literally their power source. So is what's happening now a collective thing where we all need to basically be present in this moment and focus on ourselves and a community and reforming society and not having to plan for the future? Or is that anticipation for the future not necessarily a negative thing, but something that just been taken to us from the cabal? Maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but I've definitely noticed it within myself, because I was already getting ready for Portal to Ascension 2022. The conference, right. And like that's on, and my California Cannabis Conference is on hiatus. My Psychedelic Awareness Oakland Conference is on hiatus, which is fine because 90% of our stuff is online anyway. But I'm so used to just doing, right? Maybe it's time to just be for a bit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, one of the things that I would argue the powers that be have done is they've created a society where it's very hard to be happy about being in the moment. I mean, think about it. World, especially here in the West, 8 hours minimum a day is just focused on you working to survive. Then you get out of work, you got to drive home, you got to get clothes or food, you got to clean your house. I mean, by the time you're done doing all the life maintenance things for your survival, you're lucky if you got 10 minutes to work with every day. So how do people cope with that? Well, they plan vacations, they plan things to do on the weekend. So a lot of our joy is locked away in a future conceptualization. And so you strip that all away, and now we have to contend with the moment. And I think, like you said, I think what's in my own practice anyway, I'll speak to myself here. One of the things that I've been doing a lot more is being very conscious of my thoughts, my perspectives, my emotional state in the moment, and being a lot more proactive about dealing with that. You know, there's a tendency when you're overworked to kind of just be like, well, I'll just, you know, push these emotions down so I can get these 3 other tasks done. But when it seems like because of either the lockdown or the, you know, the consciousness of the riots or whatnot, that you can't really do that anymore. At least for me, like I have to be much more conscious of my internal state of equanimity and really nurture that, because if I don't, I mean, boy, a few weeks ago I had a lot of stuff, deadlines coming up, so I had to like really work hard. I put in like 3, 4, 12-hour days back to back with each other, and by the end of the 4th day, it was like I could barely like relax at all. Like I'm finally done working and I'm like, man, I cannot get out of like work mode. Like what's going on here? And that freaked me out a little bit. So yeah.
I feel you completely, man.
Mm-hmm. So so yeah, you need to yeah. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get into some news items. Now, there's a lot happening. So much happening. Last time we had the show, we had David Whitehead on. We were talking about the riots and things like this. And some developments have happened, and I wanted to speak to some of this because a lot of our audience are, you know, way showers. They're people who have sought for the truth, discovered some principle of truth, discovered even the promise of some future better world, like a golden age society. And so we all have this like better place carrot dangling in front of our faces. And what I want to speak to here is this idea of yearning and wanting for a better world, but the way that we get there. I'm a historian. I study a lot of history, as I like to mention a lot. I study a lot of law and psychology. So for me, you know, when I think about what an ideal world would look like, I ask myself, well, what is it going to take to actually get there? And one of the things I discovered in my assessment of history, especially over the past couple of years, I made this discovery I've mentioned to you before. It's called the Sabbatean cult. So the Sabbateans, they formed or emerged around 1666 by a prophet named Sabbatai Tesvi, who claimed to be a Jewish Messiah. And he was promising a golden age scenario, and his recipe for a golden age is pretty crazy. He started issuing all these reforms of Judaism at the time. And Judaism, if you know anything about Judaism, it's an extremely doctrine and tradition-based religion. So it's literally codified in the religion through the writings that it is forbidden to question the doctrine. And the only thing that can change the doctrine is a Messiah. So when this guy, Sabbatai Tesvi, came in, he started making all these changes, and the entrenched Jews at the time, they were not having it, partially because what he was doing was taking these ideas like we need to create a world that is inherently sinful, because in the Jewish mythology, there is the golden age, or the age of the Messiah, will come either in times of great sin or great virtue. And since he thought it was very difficult to get people to be virtuous, then why don't we just make the world as sinful as possible, and that will create the golden age timeline. And that idea ended up creating those people that ended up buying into that philosophy 100 years later became the Frankish Jacobians, and they formed the Bavarian Illuminati. Now, this is all leading to the situation we find ourselves in right now, and the idea of revolution. So when the Bavarian Illuminati came around, they were formed in 1776. they ended up being instrumental not only in influencing the American revolutionaries, but also the French revolutionaries. And there's a big difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. The American Revolution was largely made by theists. So a theist is somebody who believes in God and believes in a creator, and then basically is trying to pursue and claim the most correct or accurate concept of that idea as possible. And so it's not necessarily a dogmatic type of pursuit. It's quite the reverse. It could arguably be described as a scientific pursuit of God, which I think is actually the correct way to go about it. Because if God is really the ultimate source of reality, if God is the destiny of reality, it's the source of perfection. If you don't prefer the term God, we can refer to it as creator. Then the ultimate destiny of all reality is the creator. And so by pursuing the creator, it's actually your quest to pursue the recipe or the rules or the things and principles that we as humans need to understand and embody so we can create a perfect world. And so that was the perspective of the American revolutionaries, particularly Thomas Jefferson, Washington, and I forget the other guy's name, but John Locke. He was also very influential. He wasn't necessarily an American revolutionary. Conversely, you had the French revolutionaries. The French revolutionaries were not that way at all. They wanted to strip away and remove the concept of dogmatic religion, partially because they were suffering under the yoke of the bourgeoisie at the time, or the royals who claimed to be, people who had the divine right to rule, leaning on a godly concept. So you have these kind of juxtaposition between atheism and theism. Atheism is the one that ended up influencing the French revolutionaries, and then you had theism influencing the American revolutionaries. Now, here's the big takeaway from all of this, is if you want to create a perfect society, you got to ask yourself, do you need to know how to create a perfect society? And what a lot of the French revolutionaries did, which then influenced a lot of the other revolutions that happened in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, especially in the 20th century, is you have this idea that we can create a perfect society without actually knowing how to manage that society. And Marxism is a really good example of this. Marxism asserts is that we don't need to have property rights. You don't need to have freedom of speech. You need to abolish religion. And we need to deal with the class issues by nationalizing everything and basically creating a totalitarian regime. But what we're seeing right now in the United States with this whole revolutionary protest riot kind of energy is basically the same idea. We've got a lot of people who rightfully recognize there's a lot of corruption in our world. There's a lot of things not going right. But they haven't necessarily taken the time to assess and look at what are the things that we need to understand so we can actually make a truly golden age society, a true perfect utopia, which is the Marxist dream. And what we're seeing in the world right now is, I'm going to cite the example of Chaz. If you're not familiar, in Seattle, I believe it happened 2 weeks ago, a group of rioters, Black Lives Matter protesters, and other folks who were protesting and rioting, literally conquered a 6 square block area in downtown Seattle. They came in, mind you, there are businesses, there are people living there. These are owned by other, by the municipalities, by the townships. And they came in, they planted their flag in the ground, metaphorically, and they declared this land in the name of the Free Republic of Chaz. And Chaz stands for Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Now, you might be wondering, like, well, if this is this perfect utopia where, these revolutionaries are going in, they're putting an end to corruption, they're asking to defund the police, they're trying to get rid of all the corrupt politicians, this must be like a great society where everybody's rights are respected and there's no crime and things like this. Well, that's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, within hours of this new city-state emerging in Seattle, they became very authoritarian. They called for the defunding of the police, and then they instituted their own form of police, which are basically a bunch of armed people headed by various warlords. There, some of the media is calling them, but they're basically community organizers. And you have some reports of extortion. So they're actually going to businesses into this autonomous zone and saying, hey, listen, if you want the protection of the new police, you better pay us money. And then they also created borders and they armed themselves. And so now you have a situation where there is no free speech in this autonomous zone. The rights are not being protected. There is no property rights. And this is exactly what has happened throughout history, especially in the past 100 years. I'll just make this one last point. What has happened with these people revolutions, whether it's the Leninists in Russia in the early 1900s, the Maoists in China, we can look to Venezuela, we can look to other, Egypt, there's all sorts of revolutions that have happened over the past 100 years. What tends to happen is you get the youth all worked up, raging against the system, but they don't really understand what they're doing. They finally get this revolution, and now there's this vacuum of power. And now in order to deal with this vacuum of power, they have to create a totalitarian state. So the very thing they're trying to free the people from, they end up creating. And the key, I would argue, is the reason why this happens is because as a people, we need to understand the rules of reality, specifically the rules that govern social relationships, which is laws, contracts, and rights. If you recognize inalienable rights and you create a system that balances and maintains those rights, what you basically end up creating is a society that will, over time, if people, especially the citizens, take on the duty of learning what this perfect system is and embodying it, then they will slowly root out corruption by our participation. And the cabal don't want that. So all that being said, welcome back, Neil. What do you have to say on any of this?
Yeah. So I'm a little torn, and you probably know already that I'm very not neutral in the state, bad things happen, I'm neutral to it, but neutral in that I see both sides, right? So, and so do you in a lot of ways. So when it comes to this whole thing with police brutality, we spoke a little earlier about how George Floyd, one out of many people just happened to pick on this case, but this happens all the time, right? But now I've been looking at what has been happening from this, what kind of, maybe you can enlighten me into some policies that have happened as well. But I saw, for example, the New York governor say that 3 police officers, right, have had brutality issues ever since the beginning of the riots. One of them actually hit an old 70-something-year-old man, pushed him out of the way, and he just couldn't walk fast enough to get out the way. And the guy hit his head on the curb and started bleeding, right? And so those 2 individuals were suspended with no pay immediately. And then and cases were opened. And then another police officer, one was reassigned. It wasn't. Oh yeah, the supervisor of one of those police officers that did brutality issue. Actually, he got reassigned because he wasn't supervising his police officers properly, right? And then also in New York, they've started taking away the civil. The fact that many of these police officers cannot be tried in civil court, right? So now that if something happens and you've done something illegal, you can actually be tried for it and even go to jail for it, right? So I saw a lot of positive things. And then even Trump, a couple of days ago, he released some, what did he do here? He released an executive order of what he's going to basically be doing for police officers across the whole of the U.S. And one was civil suit protection is going to be gone. And a few states have already done that. And then also, what else did he do here? He made Trump release some reforms to hold police accountable. He also said that there's going to be a federal fund, and many police departments will basically be able to apply for these federal funds, but as long as they rate at a certain ranking of basically morals and ethics and how they're treating their community, they'll be able to get money from that fund to give them an incentive, right, to basically be good, moral, upstanding citizens. Okay, so I've seen things like this come out, and every time this has happened in the past, let's talk about Fergus, for example, we haven't really seen anything but a lot of people just talking and chatting and saying, we need to make change, but change not really happening. So I have seen a lot of change coming from this, whether George Floyd was actually just an accident and it wasn't a false flag and he wasn't, even there's some pictures out there that show his chest of the guy being arrested compared to the chest of George Floyd, and they're completely different chests. George Floyd had scars on it, and one guy has just looks like he's an 18-year-old guy without any scars.
Wow. I haven't seen that yet.
So I've seen things like that. Whether that is the case and it was a false flag and it backfired, and now things are happening to reform the police department in a positive way, or whether this whole thing is contrived from the get-go, I don't know. The jury's still out. But I have witnessed many positive things. And another example I would say is the Antifa tweet. Remember that one where we're going to go into the white neighborhoods? You know, I don't know if you saw that post at all, but the the tweet of basically Antifa USA saying, okay, tonight, brothers, we're going to go into the white neighborhoods and we're going to take back what's ours, right? Guess what? A white nationalist group created that Antifa account a week before when they had hardly any followers because they just created the account, and they posted that tweet and it went viral as if it was Antifa, right? So, but I do see the negative things that Antifa has done, but then I also see that things have been incriminated towards Antifa, like this example for instance, that have nothing to do with them, that has now gone viral and are all over conspiracy channels, and people use that as an example to validate the fact that Antifa is doing what they're doing. And another one is, even a friend of mine on Instagram posted all these pictures of Antifa credit cards, right? Antifa credit cards being used all over the US and in Europe. And it's Antifa family and anti-fascist. These are credit cards that supposedly George Soros funded. And just a simple search, you can really do research into it. There is no actual evidence to suggest that is true, but there is evidence to suggest those are photoshopped images. You know what I mean? But he had like 60,000 likes on his Instagram post.
Wow. Yep.
And but half the comments were like, you're spreading fake news, blah blah blah. So the reason why I step back and I don't even really engage about it that much is because there's too much information on both sides. I don't believe that any of these officials, even especially Nancy Pelosi's freaking squatting or not. She's squatting in the White House, I guess, right?
Right.
Kneeling for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Is anything but a play for political move. So, and as always, I'm just ranting my thoughts here without any direction, but but these are my thoughts, man. So all I can really do is sit back and watch, and I am trying to be as neutral as possible. And through the neutral aspect of it all, I have seen some reforms happening. But then it goes into something deeper, like defund the police, right? You need to really explain what you mean when you say that, because that just means take away from the money from the organization that does actually serve and protect the community for the most part, if not for almost the entire part, right? So when they say defund the police, I did some research on it. And they're not really, a lot of police money actually goes to programs that maybe they don't have to go towards. And some of them actually goes to buying military surplus equipment in order to use on civilians, right? So maybe something along the lines of don't allow police to put their money into these programs rather than take away money from the police would be something that we can more easily accept.
Yeah, those are all great points. I mean, first thing, we always need to be wary of straw man arguments or half-cocked presentations of truth, especially in the conspiratorial world. We're in a situation, we're kind of like a gamer situation when it comes to conspiracy, and I think Twitter is largely a contributor to this. And what I mean by gamer is that it's like a game. Who can find the craziest, most sensational thing that you can imagine, put it on social media, and get the most likes and social reward as a result? So if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily matter if you find something true, because let's face it, 90% of the people don't care if it's true. They just care if it fits their belief system and their reality. And I would argue that the deep state, the cabal, have potentially even planted disinformation agents to paint Antifa in a bad light using bad information, so that folks like us, truth seekers, will look at it, not do our discernment, and then brandish it as truth, all the while discrediting it ourselves in the process. So that's something, it's a great point. We have to be really careful. I'll be the first one to say that I think Antifa, based on my research, is a deep state operation in the sense that it's designed to destabilize society. It's designed to entrap young people with this utopic vision of we're going to change the world and we're going to make the world a better place. And you've been oppressed and you don't have the money you need, and the white people have gotten you down, but don't worry, we're going to make them pay and we're going to get you yours, kind of thing. Well, that's very appealing to a young person, especially young people, because psychologically young people tend to be progressive. They tend to want to change the world. They want to make their mark on the world. And so it's very easy to allow yourself to be duped into falsehoods, but we got to be really careful. And to your point as well, like, listen, I think the unrest that we're dealing with is tragic in the sense that I don't think we needed it to get to this point. We could have had these conversations a long time ago. We could have all sat down at the community table and been like, listen, police are corrupt. Our institutions are corrupt. Police were militarized 100 years ago. We haven't had, normal police for a long time. And we should talk about this and we should deal with this corruption.
Yes.
That being said, though, everything, I think from a spiritual perspective, everything that manifests in our reality has a purpose. And when we embrace whatever manifests and deal with it as such, then we can bring light to darkness, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%.
But yeah.
So let me just add this to that. So firstly, what you said about basically the clickbait, clickbait culture, let's call it that. It's everywhere, man. I mean, like from Tucker Carlson to The Hill to Joe Rogan to the Young Turks to MSN, right? Even the ones that claim to not be that, like, the Young Turks, for example, they claim to not be that, but they definitely are. And maybe they were progressive and conscious at one point, but now they're definitely agenda oriented, just like Trump is evil no matter what, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's The Hill, which I actually is the only news station that I watch right now. And they're basically, one guy used to be conservative, Sagar is his name, and he worked for Fox News, and the other one was hardcore liberal, and she worked for MSN, and they were both a part of the problem, they even call themselves that, until they woke up, and then they came together, and now it's literally like a progressive, conservative conspiracy platform, where they don't talk about conspiracies like we do, but they are definitely use both sides, and they aren't pro Biden and they aren't pro Obama. They call people out for what they're doing, including the current president, right? So, but even them, the ones that I actually watch and actually took a long time to get to, they even use clickbait, and the people that are on the show aren't even the marketers that make those words. If they were the ones to choose their titles, I know they wouldn't do it, but there's just this marketing thing of getting more views. It's all about viewership. Right. So that's the issue that's been going on. But then how do you get rid of that when human mind is designed to resonate and to want to click through clickbait? If one person remains clickbaity, but we have a law that everyone else can't, what will happen? That one person that has the clickbait will probably get more views. So everyone has to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. So we've created this like web of like deceit, lies, corruption, manipulation that is so hardcore to get out of, that maybe everything just needs to stop and we can redesign it for us to even get there. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I think you're right.
And just the final thought on this is the few other things that have come out of the police brutality thing. Well, firstly, you can see all over the mainstream news, they are pro-protesting, right? Pro-protesting for sure. And definitely people's voice being heard, especially after protests were banned in the beginning of quarantine, is great. But then on the same thread, a couple of hours later, there'll be like, Trump wants to get everyone sick from COVID by having rallies, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
So how does that make sense, right?
It doesn't.
And then also a database for bad cops may come out, which is pretty cool because it's basically like a reviewing site where people can review cops. But obviously that can be kind of exploited as well. People can say all types of shit. But at the same time, these are things people are thinking about in order to make these cops accountable, right? Mm-hmm. De-escalators are going to start being assigned with cops on sites, right? Chokehold has been banned unless police life is in jeopardy, right? That's pretty vague because cops, resort to that quite frequently when it doesn't need to happen, like Eric Garner, for example, selling loose cigarettes, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So has progress, this is my last quote on that, has progress been made or no?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's great questions. I mean, with an issue like this, and then we'll bring on our guest, with an issue like this, there's no black and white answer. It's not that the Black Lives Matter people are all crazy idiots and they've got no point. It's not that the anti-Black Lives Matter people are the only, the crazy idiots and they've got no point. You can't see these issues with black and white glasses on. You have to see them with a spectrum or gradient, mm-hmm. if we want to use that term. So this is actually a really great time to bring in our guest today, who's Dustin Nemos.
He actually has not joined us yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he did join us. Okay.
No, well then, I just texted him, so we'll see. Hopefully he comes in soon.
Okay, cool. We'll just there's plenty to talk about, so no worries there. Um, well, yeah, I mean, I think especially with these issues, like, listen, like, I'm not going to be the one to say that there's no such thing as institutional, prejudice and bias and racism even. But we have to get clear on the terms. One of the things that the cabal has done is prevented us and denied us the tools to actually have good, rational conversations with each other. If you start talking about how there's police brutality, and I start talking about how there's police brutality, but we don't actually define what we mean by police brutality, we could be having like a 2-hour conversation and never be talking about the same thing. And this is one of the things that happen, especially with this Twitter, social media kind of culture where you only got 240 characters or whatever it is to work with. It's not like I can sit there and post a glossary with my statements so that everybody knows what I'm saying. Although, me, I'm kind of crazy. I try to sometimes, but the point I'm getting at here is that, it's very difficult to have a meaningful discussion when, first of all, we're not open to discussion. We just want to be heard. And secondly, we don't want to define terms. And thirdly, we don't even know why defining terms is a good thing to do. But, if we want to look at, like I started when I was talking about earlier, as a historian, as somebody who looks at history, this idea of revolution and people getting pissed off at the current situation and standing up and wanting to do something, this is not new. These things happen all the time throughout history. There's actually cycles where these things happen. Martin Armstrong's a great example, the guy who he came up with extremely powerful predictive software based on pi, the number pi. And it was so powerful insofar as predicting economic trends that the government actually came to him in the 90s, I believe it was the 90s, and were like, hey, give us your code because we need to know what's going on. Because he ended up predicting a whole bunch of basically false flags. And he's like, no, I'm not giving you the code. And ended up rotting in jail for 11 years until they finally got him out. And he still hasn't given them the code. But my point behind raising that is that there are cycles. These things happen over time. And the reason why I would argue things get fevered, just like in a relationship, you're in a relationship with somebody, if you don't take the time to clarify and be clear about what you're talking about, how easy is it for things to go crazy real quick? Oh my God, it's like, anybody who's been in a relationship, you'd be lying to me right now if you weren't telling me that couldn't happen easily. So we got to learn how to communicate better. And I think that's what's happening, is that we have this very hot kind of like center where there's a lot of arguing and fighting, but on the sides, there's this group of people who are kind of watching. And they're like, you know what, let's have a conversation about these things. Let's talk about this so we can prevent like civil war from happening. So
Right. So our guest is in, but I did have a few more things I want to go over, but what I'm going to do is just say one thing, and then maybe if we have time afterwards or we feel like it, we'll keep going. But so I just want to say there's a new study out on happiness levels. It's done by the COVID response tracking study of the University of Chicago. And the study says that 14% of American adults say that they're very happy, which is down from 38% before COVID.
Wow.
So first thing, that's interesting. Basically, only a third of the whole US were generally happy anyway, but now we're down to 14%. And then the study goes into saying that because we're social creatures and we've been disconnected from others, that has actually a play on why people feel very unhappy right now.
So true.
The least happiness we've had in over 50 years. And the study actually started 50 years ago. So since recorded time.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's no small thing there. Wow. Fascinating. Well, let's give our guest a chance to chime in on that one, because I'm sure he'd have some things to say. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. He is Dustin Nemos from the Nemos News Network. He runs a very successful YouTube channel. He's got his hands at a lot of different things. I know him because he was one of the first people to talk about QAnon, that phenomenon, and had a really balanced perspective when there was a lot of sensationalism happening at the time. So I'm really happy to introduce our guest, Dustin Nemos. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. Nice to meet you, Dustin.
Yeah, it's good to meet you guys.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now, as you can imagine. I wanted to start the conversation off with censorship, because you're currently dealing with some pretty nasty censorship situation, yeah?
Yes, I am. I joke that I'm the most censored person on YouTube. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I haven't found anyone that has challenged my my standing so far. It took over 14 months, and I actually lost subscribers on an average of like a couple of hundred a month, whereas before that I was gaining 30,000 per month. So
Whoa.
It was just as though I had been hard frozen, and until I started to joke and make that joke, nothing changed. And then magically it somewhat let up, and I was able to break 100,000. So I'm at least grateful for small victories.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things I've noticed too is I want to say it around 2017, maybe the shadow banning, to use that term loosely, really kicked up a notch. I mean, my channel was growing about 1,000 subscribers a month, and then it just flatlined. And Edge of Wonder flatlined. A whole bunch of alternative media channels just like flatlined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, so, and now I'm sure, as anybody knows, you go to search for a YouTube video, like you put out a video, Dustin, with a headline. I literally put the exact headline in the YouTube search, and sometimes it won't even pull up the video. It'll pull up Fox, it'll pull up CNN, things like this. So,
wow.
Did you notice that it was a certain subject that triggered this censorship, or do you think?
Oh yeah, this most recent one. Yeah, it was the George Floyd issue. There's an attorney. I won't say too much because I don't want to get you guys kicked off too. But there's an attorney asking questions about the origin story of this most recent sort of race riot pivot around George Floyd himself and what really happened there. And I brought some attention to that, and to Governor Abbott's response to that, which was very interesting, where he was trying to squash it. So you know, he was forcing people, or trying to force them, into resigning, which is interesting given that he's a Republican. So, you know, that's as far as I want to go without being on BitChute, you know, for your sake.
Sure. Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. You know, I was getting around 1,000 people a month on my YouTube channel up until 5-6 months ago, and I've only gained from last 5-6 months 200 people. So it froze. Wow. It froze so much that I definitely witnessed it, right? And one of our first radio shows was actually on. I actually had a segment talking about the censorship going on the channel, but you know, and my videos went from thousands of views to 300 to 500 views now per video.
Yeah. Yeah. They took something really, really important, which was momentum, away from us, the movement especially. And I know a lot of people in the health freedom movement, and there's a lot of different areas which they hit the censorship hammer, but we keep coming back somehow and winning.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder, like, if when the dams finally get removed from the internet and we have like organic traffic again, like what is actually going to happen? You know,
yeah.
because I mean, my site, Stillness in the Storm, in 2018, I switched to a new platform, and I was getting like 80,000 people a day coming to the site. And then as soon as I switched, it dropped to like 10,000. It was ridiculous. And it's crept up, you know, it's up to like 30 right now, but still, I mean, it's been an arduous process. So like, how many people are we really reaching? That's the question I want to know.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know. I can't really guesstimate in terms of our real reach. I know it's, you know, even according to people that were not necessarily pro-Q on that Jesse Waters interview. I don't remember the professor's name from the University of Miami, but he said that already 10% of the country were pro-Q in the movement sort of sense. So if that's the enemy's, so to speak, estimate of our numbers, I'm pretty happy with that as a cultural revolution. But I think that, you know, as you said, when the floodgate happens, which it seems to be now that DOJ and AG Barr are moving toward reducing some of the strength of 230 immunities for them, and we're waiting in the background with stopbitburning.com in order to try to launch a class action lawsuit against them with the Google whistleblower. I mean, we're all ready to pounce. So I think that we're going to replace fake news. And as Q said, the illegalities are going to collapse these companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell us a little bit about Stop Digital Book Burning, because I think that is very relevant at this time. What is that all about?
So it came about, ironically, because I put up a 17-second video of my daughter walking when she was about 1 year old. It was just her first steps. And sometimes I share moments like that on my YouTube channel. Mainly, I started it so she could watch those videos. It's her favorite channel. So we have a playlist. It's called Why We Fight. And, you know, when they demonetized that, just among everything else that they were demonetizing for no reason, just targeting a video of my daughter, there was nothing even said in it, much less political. I realized that it had gone too far and somebody needed to stand up. And, you know, from that, we built a network of YouTubers and content creators somewhere around 200 and up. So altogether, we could probably reach about 20 million people if we wanted to together. So we're close, we're building momentum, and the plan is when the time is right, and it seems to be getting riper and riper, we're going to pounce with all of us working together with a class action lawsuit. And hopefully we'll be the straw that broke Google's back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good to know, because I mean, one of the issues that I've seen, I've been in the alternative media, we'll say, since 2014, 2015, really. And it's this kind of king of the hill mindset, like, or Atlas kind of mindset, like, well, I'm just going to do my thing and I don't have to worry about what other people are doing. But, you know, we're in a situation where it's basically a wartime situation. The powers that be, they work together, as infractionated as they are. They have their conclaves. They meet it every year at, you know, Bohemian Grove, and they do their Bilderberg meetings and things like this. So they have these meetings. They coordinate. We need to coordinate too. We need to pool our resources together, whether it's like you were saying, defending our rights with a class action, or just simple things like supporting each other with all sorts of different things. I mean, I think that'd be very beneficial.
You know, there's sort of a segue there almost into what we're trying to do that's a sister movement to the White Hat movement, which, if you don't mind, I'll give a 30-second elevator pitch. It's called the White Hat movement, which is sort of a coming together of good guys that support freedom of speech. And it, in effect, is a network and an ecosystem of companies that want to support independent media. So they offer a really sweetheart deal for censored media figures, because they understand not only that we're being censored, they understand that it's temporary and that we have a huge audience that's loyal to us and that want to support us. So, you know, I think it's a good business decision for them. Obviously, you know, to joke and plug my own horn, I guess, a little bit here, I've got the Q book back there. It's 1,200 plus reviews on Amazon. It's a bestseller, #1 in censorship. You know, we can do things like make bestsellers. We can help these companies succeed. So there is an incentive to want to support independent media now more than ever. And the White Hat movement is just sort of a way to bring companies together that want to do that and introduce them to YouTubers that need that, because YouTube demonetized us.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really that I feel many people are actually moving away from YouTube now, creating their own platforms, right? Websites, blogs. Edge of Wonder is a prime example. Yeah. Portal to Ascension for sure. We have 10,000 hours of footage. We just use Vimeo as the server to host it, right? So that's really the way out. But you know, when the whole YouTube apocalypse happened, so many people lost their like bread and butter and the source of income that they literally rely on, because they decided to do this full time. So when you get that fight or flight mechanism that kicks in, because the fact is that, you know, your life work is now being jeopardized, and you know you're at the whim, at the hands of these great organizations. I mean, these huge organizations. What do you do about it? So we need to come together. The energy, I like to, this is my favorite thing to say, really, when I tell people, you know, collaboration, not competition. It's the energy of inclusion over the energy of exclusion. What do they, whoever they are, want? They want to exclude us from the secret, from the truth. They want it for themselves. What do? We want to bring everybody into the same understanding so we can move forward and evolve. And just because of that simple understanding, the frequency, they can't even touch our frequency. You know what I'm saying? We don't even exist in the same reality as them, because when we bring everybody together, there's such a stronger energy than when we don't.
I think that's like the spirit and the essence of the whole Where We Go When We Go Off philosophy. And you know, it takes a pack of wolves to bring down this monster, but we will do it together. Yeah. And it is a spirit of collaboration. And, you know, I think that's a really important aspect of what's helped build the Great Awakening, to keep, you know, I always pull from the Q movement symbols when I can. But I also want to point out that, you know, it's a spirit of resistance to tyranny also, just resisting them on every level that you can, be it voting Trump, be it, you know, shopping Patriot, be it supporting channels like yours, be it whatever it is, even if it means going to other platforms and just replacing companies like YouTube and Google and Amazon and Facebook and all these others that are, you know, in many cases outright fundraising terrorists now to get them bail with Antifa and things like that.
Well, I want to kind of chime in here and ask you, so because like when it comes to Q, for example, I'm not 100% sold on it myself, right?
Sure.
But I have my doubts, but I'm definitely not against Q. right? Because what you can see is this whole thing that is like this anti-Q movement that goes based on no facts of the reality that this is actually a thing that is happening, right? And it reminds me of Ben and Rob's one of their original broadcasts in which they were breaking down why they're interested in the Q movement. And part of it was that just because there's this coordinated effort to pretend that it doesn't exist makes you wonder, it makes you think about what is actually happening here. And especially if that coordinated effort is from the mainstream media that we all collectively decided pre-Trump not to believe in, but as soon as he became president, everybody believes in it, right? Those are the red flags that makes you think, like, what is going on here? What I feel that is lacking within the both communities, even though there's more than two, is really this open forum discussion about these topics, because people are so one-sided that they're choosing to ignore or to say that the other side is controlled opposition, you know? So what are your thoughts on that, or bringing people to the table, communicating with people that don't understand, or even accepting the fact that they will just continue believing the way they believe, but they're still a part of this movement?
I think there has been a lot of factionalism divided among the movement, some personality disputes, some difference of opinions around who's dead, who's not dead, you know, the JFK Jr. thing. And there's been a lot of sensationalism. There's been a lot of going off on branches. There's been a lot of what I kind of stole from Cliff High, woo-woo thinking in some cases, doesn't quite always follow logic. And I've always tried to be a voice against some of that. And I tell people, you know, let's focus on what we can prove. Let's focus on the questions, not trying to push the answers that we want to see without evidence, because it actually puts us on a branch that's hard to defend when we're out there trying to push back against fake news. It hurts all of our credibility because they point at one and they say, you know, they believe this or that, even though they have no evidence. And it sort of strawmans all of us. And we're here to sort of build the credibility of independent media. I think more than anything, the Q movement is about training an army of citizen journalists to take on and destroy fake news. I think that's something we've done mostly, all of us sort of together. And I think that's why the Q movement is the second most attacked thing out there. I think that's why they're trying so hard to censor us and destroy our businesses. I mean, the first time I was banned, it was a month before my daughter was born, my firstborn, and we had just gone full time. We had no idea what we were going to do financially to even make next month's bills. So I definitely can relate to folks out there in that situation. But as far as the Q movement goes, I don't think anybody really argues that it's nothing anymore. I think it's more now between, is it real? Is it controlled opposition, as in a strategy of tension, as in Trump is evil too? And I've considered that. Or is it legitimate and that they're trying? And then if you believe that they're trying, is it that they're going to fail or that they're going to succeed? I think that's really the main camps at this point. And I could be wrong there, but in terms of thinking that it's good, I think the fruit of the tree is very important to follow. You know, there's good fruit of the tree. We have a whole movement worldwide to show for it in just a few short years. So the Q movement is definitely a force for good, whether the Q team is or not. So logically speaking, and as far as a strategy of tension, I just don't see that because of the fruit of the tree thing again. I don't think that Trump is evil because he's exposing fake news. That's their number one weapon. Why do that if you're the bad guy or working with the bad guy? Strategy of tension. Mm-hmm. Same thing with some of the elite pedophilia. Why expose their deepest, darkest secrets? So, you know, I do think it's real. I think it's a force for good. I've seen too much to look away. I've seen too many examples of, you know, Q promotes something and then suddenly it's banned, or Q hints at something and suddenly all of the fake news are reacting to it for the next week straight. Or Q hints at something and then suddenly there's multiple mass shootings because they want to distract from a narrative. Or Q posts and then Trump posts the same second 3 times a day, something like that. So there's a lot of things that make you think, what if? But I also don't try to convince people anymore. I think we're all sort of on Team Trump at this point, or Team Radical Communism. So, you know, I don't try to convince people that Q is real so much as I use the information that he's bringing out to try to teach people what's happening. Sorry, I went so long.
No, it's perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar position. Dustin is, I discovered Q right when it started getting posted, but I was focusing on other stuff at the time. I didn't really have the time to do a whole lot of research into it. But my project with Stillness in the Storm is to just share information. It's not that I'm saying it's truth. I'm saying it's happening and maybe we should pay attention to it. And over time, I'm a pretty skeptical person. I will entertain something, but I'm not necessarily going to buy into it. And I'll even speculate about it. Matter of fact, I think one of the things that I try to encourage is healthy speculation and critical thinking and exploring ideas, because one of the things that can be very detrimental to our ability to discern the truth is avoiding things blindly that we think are untrue.
Sure.
And one of the things that the Q material in particular really emphasizes well, I would say, is that it's such a vast body of information with so many specific proofs. It can't just be summed up in a glossy, quick soundbite. If you really want to know what it is, you got to dive into it, and it's not going to take 10 minutes. It's probably going to take like 10 days, if not 10 months. But at the end of that process, you will have to evaluate the information, and it'll exercise those discernment muscles. And before you know it, now you're digging way deeper insofar as your discernment and your analysis of subject matter than you were before. And in that aspect, I think it's a beautiful thing to offer the world.
Yeah, it's basically boot camp for independent media and journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in a sense, it uses the Socratic method to train people, as you say, in reason as well. I think that's true.
Right.
My thing. Oh, go ahead, Justin. You go first.
I was just going to say that, but like all movements, there's something called the Pareto distribution, which I think is very important to understand. The Pareto distribution says no matter what system of activity you have, 80% of the effect is generated by 20% of the contributors. And in this situation, just like in any movement, whether it's the New Age movement, the ufology movement, the spiritual movement, anything really, you've got a few people who have invested the time in learning how to analyze information, read articles, know what sources to pick from, that kind of thing, and really develop a clear, rational body of facts. And then you've got the outliers, the bulk of the population, who doesn't have either the time or the skills or the inclination to do that level of research. And so if you're looking from the outside in, looking into Q or any movement really, you're going to see a few what we might call luminaries, or really devoted people who have done their homework, and then a whole bunch of other people who are just kind of following along. And that is something to consider with this, because in the end, I think whether we're talking about Q or any other movement, it's at the bottom, at the end of the day, I would argue it comes down to, do you really know what you know? And if you don't really know what you know, then you might be being deceived. And it's always better to do your homework than to try to follow along with something you think is going to be all end all. So, what are you going to say, Neil?
A lot of individuals just have this like hate for Trump because of his face value, and due to that, and then Q being connected to that, as soon as Q is saying something positive about Trump, there's no research done, and then all of a sudden it's like Q must be evil because he's supporting Trump, right? So we can't do ad hominems with our life, right? We need to really take that time to inspect and observe things. And this is coming from someone that still is on the fence, right? But I'm still observant of the fact of why people choose. A lot of people choose to resonate with what they resonate with based on their upbringing and their collective traumas. So if you don't like Trump because he said something about Mexicans and you have been standing for racial inequality, and now this Q thing has happened, you won't give Q the time of the day because you already think that it must be related to some sort of racist, fascist movement, right? So what I personally think, and Joe from Collective Evolution has said this, and I don't even want to say I think, like, this is one of the opinions that exist, that it's possibilities. Collective Evolution has said this, other speakers have said this, is that there are two factions that are basically competing for our souls, if you will, and just one of them has a slightly less dystopian view than the other, right? And one of them was like, let's call it the neoliberals, literally want to figure out a way to completely control us without giving us any rights, and the other one wants to figure out how to maintain this kind of status quo at least, but at the same time cipher out energy. So I mean, that makes sense to me, but I don't know if that's a reality. If there's any doubts in my mind, I just choose not to choose a side. You know what I mean? So, but I'll let you kind of talk about what I just said in a minute, but I've been scared of saying anything negative, not anything that can be perceived as negative about Q, because of the fear of being attacked, right? And I got to be honest, even having this conversation here right now, brings up all these anxieties within me. Like I literally have anxiety right now because of this conversation, knowing how other people will respond to it and the kind of hate you can get for just having these conversations, you know? And
I've seen that.
It's unfair. Like I saw our viewership dropped a little bit when we started getting into Q a little bit too. I saw this right there, and I know a lot of people in Portal to Ascension, we got 50% Qers and we got 50% non-Qers. You know what I'm saying? Like we got everybody in the community. So it's just like this. I want to get over this fear. I want people to stop having to like resort to their personal traumas, but realize that we all want the same thing. You know, we all want to live, have love, be love, and live in a beautiful, abundant world that we know is possible, right?
Agreed.
We all come through it from different avenues. And how are we going to get to the place where we can have conversations even with people we don't agree with? Because it doesn't seem like we're heading that direction.
I think first, real fast for Justin to reply to what you were saying about the luminaries thing. I do think that it helps that the leader of the movement, so to speak, is anonymous himself. And I think that it promotes anonymous, you know, as sort of a, not the group anonymous, but the concept of being anonymous as a necessity when sort of overthrowing the power elite. Just like in the Revolutionary War, Thomas Paine and others, they had to remain anonymous at first. And then switching over to what you had said, Neil, I do think that there is a bit of animosity, and there's a lot of emotionalism, and there is, as I said, factionalism, differences of opinions, and such a large body of people, millions and millions of people worldwide in this movement. That's to be expected. I think that's fair. And then you're also going to have some of those that, you know, maybe they're not our best foot forward, so to speak. They're not out there being polite. They're not out there being good ambassadors of the movement. They're not winning the hearts and minds, so to speak. They're just bashing liberals on Twitter, or they're just insulting anyone that disagrees with Q or something. I don't think that that's right either. I think that Q has been a message of compassion and justice. And I've always sort of spread that message of compassion and reason as well. So, you know, definitely some of the luminaries, maybe not so much, but those of us who are trying to encourage reason within the Q movement. And I think that's most of us, as the movement itself, I think, encourages reason. We don't, you know, I don't think we encourage that. I don't think there's any major Q voice that encourages that kind of thinking.
Right. We do need to hold each other's hands in this whole thing, you know, like the whole argument of you didn't do your research, so go screw yourself and do research and come back to me later. Right. Maybe some people don't have time to do the research. They're housewives, they're moms, they're dads, you know, they're working. So people are asking questions. And I think it's important for us to take the time to actually answer it, right? Take the time with these people.
Sure. And we're hashing that out. And then, of course, the fake news is constantly muddying the waters, and censorship is not helping. But we are hashing that out. And I think it's going pretty well. I think people are on various stages of the Great Awakening. And I think that's probably over half the population at this point. And before, I was always of the opinion, I was a little pessimistic about it, that 2/3 of the population just don't care about politics. They're just going to go the way that the winner goes. Really, it's decided within that 1/3 segment that's active. But since coronavirus, I think that they've sort of interrupted everyone's life, and now everyone is engaged politically, and they're starting their journeys. I think I get chills thinking about it. I feel like we've already won sort of against the fake news and against the deep state. Now I'm just hoping that I make it to the finish line in terms of not being censored completely off the internet.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, to speak to that point, and we can speak to a little coronavirus too, is when the coronavirus really started to hit fever pitch and it started to become apparent that what we were being told is not what was actually happening, especially with the numbers. The pandemic hit, I believe that came in April, if memory serves. And I saw that being shared by, like, you know, stay-at-home moms, grandparents. I mean, all sorts of people were into this thing. Like, I want to say it was viewed before it got taken down initially. Within like 3 or 4 days, it was up at like the 10 millions of views on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So, you know, one of the things I think the deep state has done is they've pulled out all their big guns. They're trying to force this mail-in vote thing because they have to get Buddy Trump out of the White House at all costs. And they're willing to basically cut off their own arm to do it, not realizing that they've actually woken up a massive amount of people, because, you know, we're all all of our safety comfort blankets have been stripped away. And now we're just sitting in this quagmire that we've been sitting in for decades, but now we're seeing it. And now people, that ire, that passion has to go somewhere. So to speak to your point, Neil, and, you know, we can discuss the coronavirus, is that I think, you know, where psychologically, you know, when you've been in a overly stressed situation, you kind of need to like get it out. You need to kind of like throw your hands in the air and dance around like a crazy person for a little bit, just to get that energy out of you, to shake up the somatic body. But then once that's come out, once you get it off your chest, then we can have the rational discussion. So
yeah.
Yeah. And anything commentary on that?
This is my, and I'll just take a pause right here just to say to everybody, you know, what we're talking about here is you can have an opinion, but you don't have to be angry or even send hate towards the other individual. And, you know, I witness that daily, like multiple times a day, through emails, through events, all types of stuff. You know, many of these individuals, let's talk about speakers, for example. I've worked with over 500 consciousness presenters, you know, producing some of their events to all of their events. And the amount of people that I've had that have said that this person is controlled opposition and completely like essay style email dissing the hell out of them without them even spending one day with this person or knowing anything except for maybe they said something that you don't resonate with because it doesn't feed your traumas, right? It doesn't mean that these people are controlled oppositions. Many times it's just a regular person with their own personal beliefs and own personal agendas, right? And that's what's happening right now. Yes, the UFO community especially, and this community would probably be one of the largest things to be infiltrated in the entire planet because it has to do with changing everything as we know it. But at the same time, many of these individuals are just people like you and me. So we need to really take our time to show compassion and love to them and understand each other and agree to disagree. We literally need to learn the tool and the technique of talking to someone, even like being passionate about it, expressing yourself, and then afterwards going out to have like some coffee with that person. You know?
If I can joke about this one, I kind of wrote the book on fake MAGA. You know, that was my contribution to the Q book. And I've got chickens pecking on my windows. I apologize. They think it's bedtime. But at the end of the day, it's pretty easy to find out who's being deceitful and who's not. You just have to study them meticulously over a course of many months and find out what their pattern is. And if their pattern is Socratic and it's reasoning and it's asking questions and it's not suppressing certain things, then it's probably an honest seeker. Now, this can be done completely based on the things that they're doing, not necessarily the things that they're saying. So you can sort of watch their actions and let that speak for themselves. And then there are some who show their pattern a different way. And I'll use the example of Jack Posobiec because, you know, he's one of the reasons I got cued, exposing him and Alex Jones and others for being fake MAGA. He has a pattern of every so often sort of throwing the fellow truther under the bus, deplatforming and doxing fellow truthers, things like that. Mike Cernovich is another example. I caught him doing it again last night on Twitter. He's every so often, right before an election, he'll start feeling blue in some of his tweets, or he'll start saying we deserve to lose both the House and the Senate. These are things that I saw him tweet, and I've got copies of all of it. You know, I watched them. And then most of the time he's saying pro-Trump stuff. So it's usually that you would agree with him. But then sometimes you'll see that pattern emerge. And then I've watched a number of these figures over a matter of years now at this point. And I've identified dozens of different, what I call fake MAGA. And that's a term that Q has used as well. And I sort of consider that part of my assignment from Q, even though that's not, just because he cued me for it. You know, I feel like that's sort of something that's important to do. And that the greatest threat to the truth at this point is not fake news anymore, because everyone knows not to trust them. All thinking people at this point have either chosen the lie or they've understood the liar. But to be fair, I also think that within the Q movement itself and within the truth media, the deceivers, and I'll add Fox News as the great example. You know, they try to throw the election. They try to put out the polls that say most people want impeachment. You know, they're going to try to throw the election again this year. So that's the greater threat, as opposed to the CNN, which everybody knows is Clinton News Network at this point, and they're just out to get Trump. It's kind of apparent. So I think it's the knife in the back as opposed to the sword in the front that's the greater threat now.
Yes, because the knife in the back makes you think that they're on your side, and they start releasing news and articles that you're like, oh my God, this guy's telling the truth. But ultimately, they have some alternate agenda.
Yeah, there's layers of fake news, and some of them are Trump and MAGA flavored.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think this is why, for me, it comes down to like essential principles: discernment, discernment, discernment. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what information source you're reaching to, you gotta train yourself in how to assess the facts. Or if time's an issue for you, at least, find a good person who's willing to do that homework and then give you their thought process so you can look at it and evaluate it yourself. That's
Yeah.
something that I try to do as much as possible. So,
Mm-hmm.
but given that we're coming up to election and all this, like, do you have any predictions or insights that you want to share about what you think might happen, as we get up to this infamous day?
Q has made it fairly apparent, I think, the next steps. And if you're following that narrative, bad chickens, basically they're flipping and flopping back between race wars and coronavirus, which neither of them are particularly doing very well for them. So it's sort of a feeble flipping and flopping going on right now. And I think that's basically going to continue. I think that Antifa is going to be allowed to prosper in places like Chaz as a reality TV show to Red Pill America. I think that serves our agenda quite well, as opposed to just shutting it down. And I also think that it sort of forces the Democrats into the spotlight in this sense politically, as being far left radicals and supporting it. And then I think in other places, it's not going to be a big deal at all. They're going to have to turn to their weather underground tactics of bombing and assassinations. We're seeing in DC, National Guardsmen were getting glass in their pizza deliveries. Police are now worried about being poisoned at fast food restaurants across the country. You're starting to see a sort of a hatred turn out toward people. So I think that the weather underground tactics of stealth bombing and sort of hit squad sort of or hits and assassination style versus open riots and trying to fight police and patriots with guns and National Guardsmen, because they're going to lose that fight clearly, is the next step. I think Antifa goes underground, and that's the only thing that they have at this point. As you said earlier, kind of all assets have been activated.
Yeah.
So
it's so funny. Like so many things start out right, and then they go underground, and they just stick around for a while. And as soon as you said that, I just thought of the flat earthers. Like they're there on your face, and now they're like, "No, we know everything, and we're behind the scenes of it all."
You want to know the group that I really want to hear from right now? Like, where's David Hogg and his anti-gun group?
Oh my God,
the left is all about guns suddenly.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I've been seeing, is that there's what I see is a lot more desperation in my assessment of cabal activities. I think maybe the golden age of the cabal was maybe like the tail end of the 19th century, early 20th century. Like they were doing a lot of stuff. They were doing it well. They were doing it well planned. I mean, they had a respect for various aspects of reality. And then this kind of spoiled brat child of the cabal mentality came in, and they thought their destiny was preordained, but it ain't.
That lazy.
And one of the things that I see psychologically is that when you're in a dynastic satanic family like this, the amount of trauma that you're subjected to is just so mind-boggling. Like, we normal people just can't even comprehend it, really. And what that does is it literally cuts the brain centers off from you being able to innovate and improvise. Well, the forces of light don't have that problem. We can improvise real time on the battlefield, and that's what's happening. And I think we're seeing a lot of people wake up, but also people wake up to kind of core principles about like what are the things that are really going to get us to this better place. It's not just going to be like waving our hands and being like, I want change. We have to actually like think about what it means. And that's what I was speaking to earlier. So but what do you think are some
of the black square up there and make all of our problems go away? If we
exactly.
That's what Black Lives Matter told me. Just put up an image that matters. No, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So as we come to a close here, what are some things do you think that given your perspective on politics and anything else really, what are some things you think that would be good to pay attention to as we proceed over the next few weeks and months?
Preparedness is probably always a wise place to pay some attention if you're not ready. because obviously in some of these places, especially Democrat-controlled areas, there may be interruptions to the food supply. You're seeing food deserts now after the grocery stores leave, after they're burnt down and looted, and truckers refuse to come in and deliver food because the police are being disbanded, and police are actually resigning because they're not going to try to fight terrorists while being basically having their hands tied behind their backs. So, being in a situation where you're prepared could be the difference between living in Chaz, literally, because there's people stuck there. They can't leave now. And watching all of this on your TV screen play out, or your internet screen play out for the next couple of years. And I think that after Trump wins, you're going to see underground tactics, but that's all they'll have left. And I think the power of the fake news will be peeled back, and censorship basically will end, and we'll have an even playing ground on the free market of ideas, and we'll dominate them.
Dude, sounds like a beautiful world.
Trump. Dominate the streets. We're going to dominate the fake news.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's great. Sign me up. Well, Dustin, it's been a great conversation with you. I really appreciate it, especially during this time. I don't think it could have been better timed. If you want to let some people know, where can we find you these days as far as access your information and whatnot?
Sure, thank you. I'm back on YouTube, away from my suspension as of tonight. So I'm starting to upload back on my main channel at Dustin Nemos. I've got nemosnewsnetwork.com in order for people to find me, because I think that I will be banned again. And maybe we'll all be banned as soon as Section 230 is dropped for them, because they no longer want to even do anything with us that may cause liability, but it's too late, I think. So, that's my main sites. I'm on Twitter, but you'll have to hunt me down because this is my third account in a month. They banned my other two. I'm still on Facebook, but I'm getting warnings there too. So, I still like to joke most censored guy on YouTube, just because there's just a war after me, and Media Matters is going after me too. So anyway, I'm too much to ranting now. Thanks, guys.
You must be doing something right. Well, Dustin,
I'm over the target. Yeah, I'm getting some flack at least.
Exactly. Well, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Love the chickens, by the way.
I appreciate you guys. Yeah, they don't go back to their coop. I haven't trained them well yet, so they come to my window and tap at night.
Yeah, they just got a voice. They're like, "Let me be heard."
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great night.
Take care, Dustin.
Take care, Dustin.
Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. All right. Well, we've got a few announcements, so I'll just go first here, Neil.
And I have a few things I want to say news articles wise, just to list through it, because things might change next time. So I'll do that when you get to me as well.
Right on. Okay, great. So for myself, I took a 2-week pause for Into the Storm and edgeofwonder.tv. That is going to be starting up next week. We've got a lot of great episodes in the queue here. We're going to get into some pretty heavy information. One of the things I did with the series is I started to just drop some big stuff out to see like how far I could go about talking about stuff. And I'm really delighted to say I think I haven't hit that ceiling, so to speak. So I'm ramping up the disclosure, ramping up the discussion. We're getting into some really heavy discussion, like if free will is really so sacred, why is it that it seems to be violated all the time? Well, we're going to talk about that in the upcoming episodes of Into the Storm. So check that out, everybody. edgeofwonder.tv, Into the Storm, my show. And that'll start up next Tuesday. So take it away, Neil. What you got?
That's awesome. So I'm going to list through these. We'll probably be another 10 minutes, guys. And only because I want to give you the opportunity to maybe respond to a few of these, and then I'll talk about my announcements. So firstly, Trump supposedly has gone down in the polls, but I actually did some research, and he's only gone down 2%, which isn't anything. So the mainstream media is saying he's gone down in the polls, but it's plus or minus a few percent anyway. So that goes to show mainstream media is trying to push this in order to control the psychology of people as it is. However, Biden has gone up 16% in his popularity. And they're saying that the main reason, this is even coming from progressive liberal outlets, that the mainstream Joe Biden, the reason why Joe Biden's going up 16% is because he's just staying in the basement. And his campaign and other politicians are literally telling him to stay in the basement, so much so that the article was called Biden Stay in the Basement, because it's about him just staying out of sight, hoping that things will collapse so that he can come out as like, oh, I'm the savior, even though he hasn't said anything. I forget how you say his name, Charlemagne, something like that, on The Breakfast Club. I guess he's a famous guy. Everybody knows him except for me and
Yeah, I
probably
didn't
you.
know him either, yeah.
Right? Oh, it's the Breakfast Club. I've seen him before. I don't know if he's like some sort of whatever he is, but anyways, he did an interview with him, and it was obviously like the topic right now of Black lives. He's Black, and he had this conversation with him. Biden really didn't answer questions that right, but he even admitted it that he basically has no choice but to vote for him, because if you have already made the decision to be anti-Trump, you have no choice but to vote for Biden. But the majority of people voting for Biden are inherently against him. So think about how interesting it is that we may have the largest voter turnout ever because of things like what Dustin said, is everybody has been called to the plate now because of what's happened. But the majority of people who are voting actually do not want to vote for this candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
it's very paradoxical what's going on with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just real quick on that one. When Trump was getting elected, I was pounding the table saying voting is a psyop. You're just putting your energy into a cabal system, all this stuff. And that is true at a principle level. But I didn't know that, by all appearances, I happen to believe, because I've done some research, that Trump is not an established candidate. So I am suggesting that if you care about actually trying to vote for a candidate that might actually be somebody who could change things in an interest that you care about, this might be the first election in like the past 50 years where that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2016 one, we didn't really know for sure. At least I didn't know for sure. There was a few people who were saying Trump is not, part of the establishment. He's not part of the deep state. Now I think it's pretty damn obvious. You got to have your head really buried in the sand to believe that Trump is part of the bad guy, or part of the bad guys, at least in my opinion. So this is an election where we might actually be able to vote for somebody we want in office instead of just trying to vote so another guy doesn't get in office.
Yeah. And I'm extremely, people that get dumbfounded when they realize that someone they know voted for Trump. I've witnessed that a lot. Like, so many people talk to me on the streets, like as if I hate Trump. And I'm just like, you don't know what I like, or if I like, and to be quite honest, I am not for Trump. And that's why this show, Awarewolf Radio, is amazing, because we have no agenda. Because Justin just told you, hey, if you want to vote for someone that will change stuff, maybe consider Trump. I'm not going to tell you to vote for him. And here I am saying, I don't even know. I don't really believe this guy. This guy's a fool, right? But at the same time, he's not as bad as they're saying, because of all the facts of the fact that mainstream media is anti him, all this stuff, right? So it's just like, I find that very beautiful. Just wanted to.
No, I completely agree. That's one of the things I love about our gig. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, so moving on. All things said by the CDC and the WHO have turned out to be completely false. When is someone going to say, and this isn't freaking conspiracies, alternative news. This is the facts. Some examples, but definitely not all of them. The mask thing. Don't wear masks. You don't need masks. They won't help. They won't help stop the spread at all. And now everyone needs a mask, right? Mm-hmm. Another thing. Millions of people would be dead by now in the U.S. Not even close. Not even 500,000.
Yep.
Mutates. So no vaccine is possible. That was the beginning, said by the CDC. But they had not even enough evidence, or did they, about this mutation. And now they're saying that vaccine will definitely be the solution to moving things back to normal, right? Mm-hmm. No info on health and immunity, right? Even the Canadian Health Department said, I'm paraphrasing here, all health-related talk about COVID doesn't work, and boosting your immune system does not protect you against COVID-19. But isn't it attacking people with low immune systems? So technically, if you increase your immune system, it could help out, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They said it was easily transmittable on surfaces. I guess everybody probably remembers that one, which is part of why we went into quarantine. But now evidence suggests it's the complete and utter opposite, 180, right? Said is easily transmittable from asymptomatic people or before people show symptoms. And now they're saying that it's not at all, that it's extremely rare to be spread through asymptomatic people, right? And the interesting part is CNBC released that article and I shared it. And then Facebook fact checker told me that this article was partially false, but it was from a mainstream outlet saying this stuff. So this whole fact-checking thing is going so out of hand that we're in the age of confusion and chaos right now. Seriously. I think a lot of people go around saying things that might not even be true, including, I'm trying not to be one of those people, but it happens,
Oh yeah, of course. There's only so much time, and unless you've got a medical degree, it's not easy to look through CDC data to see what's actually happening. So
Right. So we need to hold these people accountable for telling us stuff that completely obliterated our entire society, right?
thank you.
But
Yes.
no one's going to do that. Like
Hmm.
they have too much power. I mean, Trump said he's going to defund the WHO, but if it was a liberal president that was on there and that Democratic president said the same thing based on the evidence that has actually come out that the WHO literally took a verbatim memo from the Chinese government and said it as if it's their own statement. So the Chinese government said, this is what I want you to say to the world about our numbers and everything. The evidence shows clearly, it even came out on mainstream news because it was so huge, that they took that information and just relayed it without even doing any fact checking on it.
Wow. Yep.
Right?
I know.
So also the hope for the standard of living. Okay, moving on. Hope for the standard of living for the next generation is the lowest it's been in 25 years. And the poll started 25 years ago. The poll.
We're just hitting rock bottom across the board now.
Yeah, man, this is freaking crazy, dude.
Yeah.
And on one level, it's reassuring I'm not the only one having these feelings, right?
Sure.
But on another level, it's like, whoa, dude, like people are sad and depressed, man.
Okay. Well, yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
No, do you want to say anything? Should I move on?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick that yes, I think this is a kind of like end time situation where all of the comfort blankets we normally rely on, particularly in the field of authorities, are breaking down because it's so blatantly obvious that our trusted authorities are lying, or at the very least don't know what the heck they're talking about. So in that situation, yeah, your anxiety is going to go through the roof.
Yes, man.
But, with that, you have an opportunity to do what you've done, which is do your research and gain an awareness and then figure out what you want to do given all this. And I think that's something that we all should take to the bank is, I would suggest don't just escape reality by diving into Netflix or a video game or whatever the heck, or a bottle or drugs or anything like this, because you're going to have to wake up to the crap the next day anyway. A better thing to do is sit down, do your homework, face the dragon, see if you can get a handle on things and come up with some decisions that'll make you feel better.
Yeah, confront it now. All the numbers are basically showing that ever since we started opening up society, the numbers are actually going up in 20 states. So what does that mean? Because it's not really reflecting in the external reality that I'm living in literally the highest county of cases in the whole of California where I am at right now in LA. I don't see it, but we're definitely supposedly going up. Is this a fake number thing? Are they trying to close us down again? Or is this real and people are getting sick again? Because it makes sense. If we got this virus out, we're all going out again, it's going to go up. Does this mean we're going to shut down and it's going to happen all over again? Or is it going to happen like that until they create a vaccine? There is some sort of agenda there, but all we can do is speculate. At Arizona, the ICU capacity, and this is on mainstream media, but I'm not in Arizona, is literally at capacity now. They are all being overwhelmed. And that whole thing was to slow down the COVID-19 spread in order for, systems and medical facilities not to be overwhelmed. But it seems like they are saying it's being overwhelmed. I haven't witnessed it with my own eyes. All I can see is articles by the people I don't trust.
Right. Yep. It's a big question. Well, yeah, I mean, one real quick thing on that is that they ramped up testing about a month ago or so.
Yeah.
So we would ostensibly see more numbers because they're doing more testing.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah.
Even with advanced technology, this isn't really possible to do unless we can have some sort of technology where you can close your eyes, put something on your head, see everybody like in X-Men. You know what I mean?
Right. Cerebral.
Yeah. Or not even that. What's the freaking the main doctor?
Yeah. What the heck is Xavier? Yeah.
Xavier. You know that thing that he goes into and he sees every single mutant? Unless we have that technology where we can do our signature of every virus in their body, we're never going to know the truth.
We're never going to, yeah, exactly.
So the UK came out with a drug that lowers the chance of dying. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Okay, and this is actually mainstream as well. And so here it goes. COVID-19 patients in the UK have been treated with dexamethasone today after a UK trial of the drug. This is a couple of days ago now. Found it could save lives. The treatment is immediately available and already in use in one of the NHS, said Health Minister Matt Hancock. It is not by any means a cure, but is the best news we've had. It's actually helped people survive that would have died. So, wow. From 2% or is it 0.5% death rate, it's gone down, because of that drug. So, these are movements into the right direction, I think. And moving on here, almost done. Well, okay, now stimulus check update, guys. Will there be another stimulus check? Around 84% of the people that received a stimulus check said that it's not enough, meaning that majority of the US, including all sides and all parties, have said that that $1,200 a month isn't enough for me to survive or even bounce back from this. And many people, and then also many people are actually okay from, you know, from what's happening, because a lot of people got unemployment, but millions of people did not, right? And myself, like, I try to apply for it because there was a roundabout way I could get it, but the site completely doesn't let me do it online anymore, and I can't get a hold of them, right? I was trying to see if I can get some, hey, I want some money too, right?
Sure.
So like a lot of people, actually almost the majority of people, are making 134% to 150% off what their original salary was.
Wow.
So that's quite a lot more. And I've listened to things, NPR, all types of stuff, where people have come and said, you know, how much money extra they're making and how it's actually helped them out. But then there's people on the complete flip side. The income inequality from this thing is going to be huge. And because those people are doing, like right now in California, you're allowed to open up. The restaurant downstairs, you know, the pho place on the first floor, right? They were could have opened up 2 weeks ago, but they didn't open up until yesterday. And a lot of this has to do with, from my research, is that people want to wait until the end of unemployment before they open up their small businesses, because a lot of these people are getting unemployment that is more than how much they would have got if they work at their business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're going to see a lot more places if we don't go back into quarantine. July 31st is the end of the last payment. If you go back to work, you can't get any more payments. So many people, even though we can go back now, aren't going to go back until August 1st, and businesses won't open up like they were before because of this fact.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a really tenuous situation. That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, so last thing is my announcements. So everybody, some events coming up, portal2ascension.org. First of all, we are launching a new site in about 4 weeks. It's going to be pretty epic. It's going to have a really robust backend where you can see the 10,000 hours of plus footage. If you sign up for free, you get over 2,000 hours of free presentations. And then the front end is going to look really awesome too. We're going to have live events section running independently, online events, conferences, because online and live conferences, and tours and retreats, because we're also getting in the tours and retreats business now, having our first one scheduled in the Yucatan of next year. And so it's going to look really cool. Many events there. And then also our app will be released 1 to 2 weeks after that. And we're going to do a huge campaign. So you'll probably see our ads promoting our website. But our app's going to have the ability to cast to your smart TV. We're going to have a Roku app. We're taking the technology to the next level, investing all my time and energy into this. So please do check it out. You can go to portal2ascension.org, sign up, and check it out there. A couple of events that are coming up this weekend. We have 2 events. We have a 7-hour weekend retreat with Emery Smith, which he's going to bring on medical doctors and professionals, interview them. That's going to be 3 hours each day. And then also we have Lori Spagna, The Energy of Animals and Human Connection is the name of the event. It's at 12:30 to 3:30 on Saturday. You can sign up under online events of Portal to Ascension. And she is basically an animal communicator, super legit. Like, I don't put on animal communicator just like that. I have communication with her. I've seen her videos. It's freaking crazy. Things that she talks to horses about and has them do, like, wow. So we're going to do a 3-hour webinar with her on what is the history of the animal connection of humanity, how it connects to star beings and galactic origins, and what species are in place for what kind of purposes on Earth, and also how to tap into your own potential to communicate with these support animals, right?
wow.
So that one. The weekend after that is the Ascension Exopolitics and Disclosure Online Conference, 10-hour online event, portal2ascension.org, Michael Sala, Laura Eisenhower, John D'Souza, and myself. And we're also going to have a panel with the 3 of them at the end of the day. So if you're interested in any of those, go to portal2ascension.org, online events, sign up there. Last thing about this, we had a no one turned away policy for last month and this month. I'm extending that to the whole entire year. So now if you cannot afford an event for the whole year, when we got another 60 scheduled, you can attend for free or you can donate any amount. Just go to the contact page on Portal to Ascension, let us know what event you want to attend, and then you can check it out there. So again, this is the time for information. You don't need to spend all the time on Netflix, maybe 10%, 20%, or if you're me, 50% of it. And then, I never hold myself accountable to what I tell others. And then the other half the time, check out our footage. Check out Justin's. I didn't even know you could create documentaries like that, bro. We got to have a conversation later about it.
Yeah, definitely.
But what Justin's creating on Edge of Wonder, this is the time to be informed. Things are opening up. Society is going to be needing your presence once again very soon, whether it's in this movement or whether it's just you going back to your job and, clocking in the hours you need to be a part of the system that we've created. So right now is the perfect time for you to go to our websites and others and learn this information.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited that your platform's taken, especially the no one left behind or no one turned down policy. That's really beautiful. It's like the pay it forward, philosophy. So
exactly.
I think that's great. So, well, great, everybody. Well, thanks, Neil, for your updates. Great news articles. We will be back in 2 weeks for another wonderful show, and we will continue to bring the latest news and information. So definitely check out Neil's events, portaltoascension.org. You can check out my work at stillnessinthestorm.com. You can also see my show, Into the Storm, on edgeofwonder.tv. So thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay conscious, stay healthy, and get grounded, because we're on for a big roller coaster right now.
Straight up. Take care, guys. Bye.
Take care.